Hello everybody, this is Albert with Green Tea House. I hope you're doing well today. Today we're going to talk about the 4 different forms that tea has taken since the Bronze Age. Now before we begin, if you haven't done so already, please come and visit us at the tea shop here in New Braunfels, Texas. Also subscribe and hit the notification bell if you haven't done so already, and post a comment if you like. So tea, we have an episode here, 4,500 years of tea history in 10 minutes. We do a lot of history of tea stuff here, and I thought it'd be good to do a quick episode on the way tea has changed since the early age. And I think you can really kind of encapsulate it down to 4 periods. How this, now today, the most consumed beverage on the planet, used to be drunk, and you could argue that it is the healthiest beverage on the planet. The different forms it's taken through the various periods. So the first period would be medicinal brew. So the medicinal brew would be from the Bronze Age really to about, 500 AD. So this would be through the classic Qin dynasty period around the time of Christ. Of course, tea was not around Christ or anything like that. During this time, it was only in China and neighboring areas like Tibet. And at this time, if you were to drink cha, or you drink whatever was called tea, it was nothing like it was now. This would be more like a medicinal brew. So it would have a bunch of other things in it that would be mixed in it, not just like yak's milk and stuff like that, but spices, herbs, maybe some meat even. And so it was like a chunky soup, so to speak, and it was exceedingly bitter because, of course, at this time, we didn't really know much about tea, and really you can look at a lot of the apocryphal stories how even tea came about. Normally it's an emperor who was sitting under a tree, and then the leaf fell into his hot cauldron of water, and then he drank. It's like, oh, this isn't bad. But you definitely see a change starting really, I would say, in the Tang dynasty. So if you start looking around 600 AD to about 1000 AD, the second form is more of what we're getting to pure tea. And so around this time, you're going to have the classic work, the classic of tea done by Lu Yu. This was written in the 600s. So even at this point, he is writing a treatise. It's not a big book you can find on Amazon, on how tea should be done. And so around this time, you see the second phase. And the second phase is going to be brick tea. And we still see brick tea today, most famously with the dark teas like Pu'er. You can find bricks, bird's nests. So we sell the bird's nest and the cakes. You can find bricks and other shapes. And so this was kind of the big phase, kind of like the Tang dynasty. So if you look maybe, 500 to 1000 AD, they would get the leaves, they would compress them when they were still wet and harden them. Now, we talked about this on the episode on the Russian caravan and whatnot, that putting them in bricks made them a lot easier to transport. They could wrap them up in bamboo, and they were easier to transport than the 4th iteration of tea, which is loose leaf, because if you cut loose leaf open, right, it's going to get dirty and whatnot, and if it could get wet and whatnot. But with the bricks, it's just easier to transport on the horse trail to Tibet, for example, or later on up to Russia, which happened a much later time period than this time period. But this time you see the bricks. And today, again, really only Pu'er, you're going to see a lot of kind of the bricks, the throwback to the bricks. Third period starts really in the Sung dynasty. I would say about 1100 AD, and this is going to run to about 1600 AD, where we start leaving the bricks, but not completely, because you will still find brick tea all the way to today. But even when we get to loose leaf around the Ming dynasty, you're still going to find places that still do all their tea brick because it was just easier to transport. There's a lot of benefits to brick tea. But the third phase would be powdered tea, as you would call it. And when we think of grinded up leaves into a powder, we think about really today, the only well-known one would be matcha from Japan. And so if you look around 1100 AD to about 1600 AD, this was kind of the fad that you would find for oolongs, that you would find for white tea, you would find for all the categories, aside from black, because black didn't really exist at this point, that they were grounded up into powder. And so you think, okay, well, why does matcha still exist? Well, remember that Japan got their tea, just like Korea and Vietnam and all these places, from China. They were Buddhist monks. Buddhist monks were the ones that brought them from China to other parts of Asia. And so you can kind of guess what period of time the Buddhist monks brought it to Japan. It was during this time. And if you look today, of course, in Japan, the large majority of tea is loose leaf. It's infused. but we still do have the throwback to matcha, and matcha is one of the healthiest teas on the planet. It's just so high in catechins and high in theanine and high in caffeine and whatnot. But in China, which was the heart of tea land, of course, powdered tea was the norm until about the 1600s. And at this point, the 1600s, now we got to infusion. There was an edict done by the Ming Emperor at the time in the mid 1600s that promulgated out that tea from now on, including his tribute tea, we have an episode on what is tribute tea, all tea had to be done loose leaf. And so we've had it for, when you look at the total history of tea, it's not that long, you know, maybe an eighth of the history of tea has been in this iteration, which is loose leaf tea. So we've only had it about 350 years. And really, you could say that there was a good, 80-year period. And we talked about it recently with the English Social History episode series, how really starting in the 1940s, we left loose leaf as a whole, not in Asia, but in Europe. We left loose leaf to do tea bag, and only in the last 10, 15, 20 years do you see us coming back to loose leaf. But those are the four. You got the medicinal brew, you got the bricks, and the other compressed cakes. Then you have the grounded up powdery form in the Sung Dynasty, and then later you have what we have today, which is loose leaf. Guys, I hope this helps. Post in the comments. Love to hear from you. Until next time, take care. God bless.